Hey guys, Michael23B here, and welcome back to another redstone video. And today, what I have to show you are some wireless vine ladders. Now, I do have a few different devices here that are for slightly different purposes, but they all work on the same basis, and that is these weeping vines. Now, weeping vines can be grown using bone meal, and they can grow as far as you want, and then you can break them with a piston. And yeah, these devices would be really good if you had like a secret base up in the ceiling, you wanted a hidden entrance to it, or if you had like a mini game, like if you had helicopters or really whatever you want, this would be a really good device for that. And yeah, like I said, these devices are wireless, so they work off of these calibrated skulk sensors, and I can throw a snowball here from the ground. There's no wiring needed in between me and the device. I can climb the ladder, and then I can also throw a snowball again, and it breaks the vine. I can also use the note block. That grows there. I can turn it back off again. And yeah, these calibrated skulk sensors work great for this application because you can tune them to really whatever action you want to use them with. So there's a list here, depending on what the signal strength is into this crystallized side, the crystallized texture. You can calibrate it to detect different events, such as the snowball that I threw, or you can calibrate it to detect equipping armor, or even the snowball hitting a block. But yeah, there are some limitations. You don't want to tune it to something that will activate it when you don't want it to. Such as when the pistons are firing or when you're just walking around. But yeah, I found that throwing snowballs was a really good action to tune them to. It just works really beautifully, and you don't even need to aim at the device if you don't want to. I can aim directly down and it still works. And yeah, that's just the most convenient for me. So I'll just sort of explain the basic components of this device. You have the weeping vines, you have a dispenser with bone meal, you have the activation device, which in this case is the calibrated skulk sensor. That triggers the T flip-flop with the cauldron. And what you can't see under this boat is a comparator, and that comparator is what triggers our piston or our door to fire, and that breaks the vine, and it also prevents it from growing. And then you also have the device that triggers the dispenser over and over to grow the actual vine. Now, in this particular device, I'm using a boat and a cobweb. And what the boat allows us to do is it allows us to trigger the dispenser for just enough time that the vine is able to reach the ground. And I'm just going to push this cobweb back here. But yeah, with the timer that triggers the dispenser, you have two options. You can either leave it on, or you can have sort of an auto off timer, which is what the boat is for. So I'll just show you what that does really quickly. This piston fires the boat up into the cobweb, and that actually triggers the plate for a short amount of time, which triggers this observer timer, and that triggers the dispenser down there. So like I said, you can do that, which allows the vine to grow to just the right length, or you can leave the dispenser, you can leave the clock on, which fires the dispenser. There's really no harm in doing that because it doesn't use up any bone meal. It's just that it's kind of noisy, unless you got like a texture pack or something that turns off the noise. It can get pretty noisy if you don't turn it off. But yeah, and then we also have a note block here. We can turn it off or trigger the device from up here if we want to. So we have two different activation methods. And yeah, that's pretty much the basic components of the device. You also have, you have bone meal input here if you want. You can put bone meal into the dispenser. And then you also have, you have some options here. So I could break this. I could make this vine go as far as I want. That way we can climb up even further into the ceiling if you want to do that, and the device will still work. Obviously I've inverted it there a bit, but just throw another snowball. Gross. No block. Breaks. So yeah, you have a few options here. But yeah, this is basically my compacted design. Now, obviously, something else you can do if you don't want a calibrated skulk sensor or don't want to spend the time getting that, you can just use a target block, and then you can hit that and it grows just the same. It's just that if you have an exposed target block, that's kind of ugly, kind of makes it not so secret anymore if that's what you're trying to go for. But yeah, that also works. It's a great activation method. But I'll just grab a calibrated skulk sensor back here. And let's just, let me place my redstone. And I'll place that. And then in this barrel, we actually have 4 unstackable items. That is what's leading to our 3 signal strength. And that tunes it to the thing that I like most, which is throwing a snowball or an egg. And like I said, there's a certain detection radius. So it detects that. And yeah, 16 block detection, spherical radius. You can make the device come closer to the ground if you want to have like a wider detection range from the ground. But I have it up just about 15 or 16 blocks. That way it only detects pretty much when I'm right under it. Not exactly under it, but just slightly under it. But yeah, I found that that works really great. And yeah, so here's to showing you some of my other designs. So here's another design. It's exactly like my other one, except that it has a different door mechanism. So if you had a ceiling here, no one would be able to tell that there's a secret door in the ceiling. I can throw a snowball, it opens. I can throw a snowball again, it closes. And yeah, you would never know there's a door there unless you threw that snowball. And yeah, it's exactly like the other one. You have a boat which triggers the plate for a short amount of time, which triggers the dispenser and grows the vine. And yeah, this, you have 4 wooden shovels. I will have a world download for this in the description if you want to check it out closer. But you can pretty much just kind of get the gist of this whole device. You have a 2-tick repeater here, which triggers those pistons. And that comes out from the cauldron, triggers the piston door. And you can just kind of get a general sense of this whole device. You have some options here with the manual activation method. You can move the snow block around. Say you wanted it over here. You could place that there. Place an observer there. Observer there. Observer there. So you could sort of move this note block closer to the vine if you want to. So here's the exact rundown of how this works. When you throw a snowball or an egg or an arrow within a 16 block spherical radius of this sensor, that picks it up. This fires the piston. The sensor fires the piston for a short while. This has an observer on top of it, and the output is firing this way. So when this piston gets pushed up, it actually fires into this block here, and then it triggers this note block, which basically bud powers this piston. And so this is our T flip-flop with the cauldron. It fires it back and forth depending on what state it's currently in. There's a cauldron under the boat, which powers the door. And then you also have the comparator triggering this rail, which triggers this piston. It fires the boat up for a short while, and then the cobweb slows the boat down so that it triggers the plate here for just enough time. And that plate is triggering the piston. It pushes this observer out, and that creates an observer clock. And then that powers the observer clock. It powers the dispenser over and over again. And that grows the vine. That is the essence of the whole device. And so I do have another more compact version of the design here by my friend Syxal on the Cubekrowd server. I'll just go ahead and fire this one. That goes all the way to the ground. I can fire another snowball and it cracks. So this one works great. It can break sometimes to where the vine won't grow completely down, but that's easily solvable by just throwing more snowballs. But yeah, this device is even smaller than all my other ones, and this one is based on a comparator clock. So you have 7 stackable items and 4 unstackable items. That provides just enough time for the dispenser to fire enough times for the vine to grow all the way down. And yeah, you have a calibrated skulk sensor, you have an observer here, another observer there, and you can just see the general gist of all the blocks in this one. And last but not least, we have my helicopter design here. Let me go ahead and throw a snowball at it. Again, I don't have to fire it directly at it, just sort of within range, directly below it. I can fire it again. And the only bad thing about this, and it's not even bad, it's just that there's no automatic off timer for this one, so the dispenser is always going to be firing until I turn it back off again. But yeah, it works really well. Of course, I need to be pretty close to it, but that's based on how low it is to the ground. Let me go ahead and grab a target block here, and I'll go ahead and grab a piece of redstone. So obviously you can use a target block instead if you don't want a calibrated skulk sensor. It's just that I don't really like the look of this target block on the base of the helicopter. But yeah, that works really well. Of course, you do have to have a little bit of aim, but that's not really that hard. Alright, now this device works slightly different than the rest, obviously because I had to fit it inside this helicopter. And by the way, this helicopter was not designed by me. It was designed by a player by the name of Tool on the Cubekrowd server. And yeah, it's a really great design for this. I'm really happy with how well it worked for my device. But yeah, the device for this specific version was specifically made to fit inside this helicopter. So I can hit that button, it fires. I don't really know why I'm getting bone meal right now. But yeah, it should work really well. It's just that this one doesn't have an automatic off timer, so the dispenser will always be on until you turn it back off. But yeah, you also have extra bone meal input with these droppers. Of course, you don't need these droppers. You could use like a hopper chain and some chests up here if you wanted to. But yeah, I found the dropper chain is a good solution for this, and it looks nice. Okay, so here's the same design. I just pulled it, stripped it out of the helicopter, and brought it over here. So this is the device that was form-fitted to work inside the helicopter. And there's actually something different about this one, about the activation device. So if I break these minecarts, you'll see there were 3 minecarts there. And what gold pressure plates are able to do is that they're able to detect how many entities are on top of them. And then the calibrated skulk sensor is actually able to be calibrated by the signal strength that this gold pressure plate is outputting. So 3 minecarts means 3 signal strength. That means we're calibrating it with a signal strength of 3, and that will allow the sensor to detect a snowball throw or an egg throw or whatever. And let me go ahead and grab a rail here. So the way that you actually get 3 minecarts in the same spot, so you place a rail here. I'm going to place 1, 2, 3, and that will fall onto the pressure plate. And now this is calibrated to detect snowballs. So let me go ahead and fire this. You can see it works great. I can fire it again. Turns off. And so yeah, this whole device was form-fitted to fit inside that helicopter. You have a redstone dust here coming out of the sensor, and that just comes down here. That's not really going anywhere, but it's used to turn this redstone dust into this piston, which pushes out this observer, which triggers both of these. This turns on the dispenser clock, and it also turns on, it pushes out this cauldron, which fires the piston here, which prevents this from growing. And yeah, that is the whole door. And so now I actually have some other things to show you with the copper bulb. So let's go to that. All right, so here we are in the 1.21 snapshot. And as you can see, we've got a copper bulb as part of this device. And yes, I am very annoyed by Mojang's nerf of the copper bulb. I really hope they revert it. But yeah, we'll just talk about this device here. This is a 1-wide device. And again, we have these 3 minecarts on top of a gold pressure plate here. That goes into the skulk sensor, the calibrated skulk sensor on the crystal side. And so we've got this copper bulb powering the piston, stopping the vine from growing. We've got our dispenser full of bone meal, and we have a observer clock that grows the vine using the bone meal. So I'll just throw a snowball. You can see that grows. And this one doesn't actually have, I can turn it off there. This one doesn't have an automatic system to turn the clock back off, so you're gonna hear that dispenser ticking over and over again until you turn it back off. But you know, that's not a big deal if you don't care about it. There's also, like I said, there's resource packs that can turn that dispenser noise off. But yeah, this one works very well. It's a nice compact one wide design using copper bulb. We also have one that's not one wide, and it has an automatic off system. So once I throw the snowball, that minecart gets pushed up and then it goes back down. I can turn that back off. And yeah, I'll just fire this again. See, that goes up into the powdered snow and it falls back down pretty quickly, with leaving just enough time for the vine to grow all the way down to the bottom. Throw it again. And yeah, so I won't have a world download for any of these, but I'll just show you. We have the calibrated skulk sensor over here. We have 3 minecarts on a gold pressure plate, and that calibrated skulk sensor triggers the copper bulb, turning it on, and then that goes out to the output into the piston. An observer detects that comparator. It goes into this piston, and that pushes this up into the pressure plate. And again, this can be wooden or it can be gold, just as long as it's not stone. Yeah, that'll trigger, and it triggers the observer clock, pushes this piston out, triggers this observer clock, which triggers this rail, which Bud powers, or QC powers, or whatever. It powers this dispenser full of bone meal, and it triggers it for just enough time for it to reach the bottom. And yeah, you can climb up. So as you can see, if you want to build it, that is the full device. There's nothing in this minecart or anything, just the 3 minecarts on top of the gold pressure plate like I showed you. And then we also have a design here. This uses a flush door, so if you wanted the entrance to be concealed with this one, again, we have a copper bulb. Throw it. This goes all the way down, and then after a bit of time, this will turn off. You can throw that again, and it closes. And so this design is also pretty simple. You have the 3 minecarts on the gold pressure plate. That triggers the copper bulb. It's basically the same exact thing as that one. So you can see all the design components here, except this version uses a different door mechanism. So you've got the comparator powering that piston. You have a redstone repeater on 2 ticks here, and that goes into this block, and you have the 2 sticky pistons and this sticky piston. That is about it for the 1.21 devices. Again, you can modify them however you want. I just tried to make them really compact here. Alright, and that's just about it. Just one final thing to mention is that actually when you break the vines, they actually drop vines, so there's some tallow drops. That's why I had this down here. We're actually getting some vines out of here. So all of these devices technically generate vines as you break them. But if you're in creative, you can turn that off with tallow drops. Otherwise, you can collect them with like a hopper chain down here if you want to. But yeah, not really a big issue, but just something I thought I'd mention. But yeah, if you want to use these, go right ahead. They are pretty fun. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next episode. Have a good one.